Buongiorno. T. Walker Wine Session number 18. I can say that with pretty good confidence. That's the right number. Welcome. I've got with y'all a really fun wine today. It's a great complement to the last review where I reviewed a Kerner, which is the grape variety, a white grape from the Alto Adige of northern Italy. This is a really fun wine and also a little bit of an older wine. Hopefully that focuses in well, but if it doesn't, I'll let you know and put in the bottom there the variety and the producer. But this is a producer called Pravis, Pravis, and this is a really fun variety. The grape is called Rebo, R-E-B-O. They call this wine Rebo Rigotti. That is the gentleman who created this grape variety hybrid, just like Kerner, a hybrid variety about a century ago, so 1920s. He crossed two grape varieties, Teroldego and Merlot. Merlot, very well-known international variety, brings this nice suppleness to the wine, softness, a roundness. And then the Teroldego it's an ancient variety, is a parent of Syrah, which is also an old variety. So this one's been around for a long time. And Teroldego has an kind of violet-hued, pretty dark-colored wine with some acidity. So this is a really unique wine in itself, the grape variety. This bottling, which is the 2011 vintage, so a little over a decade. This wine comes from the southern half of the Alto Adige as compared to the northern half, which is where that Kerner came from on the last review. So in the southern part of the Alto Adige, the valley is a little bit wider. This area is called the Valley of the Lakes, or the Valle dei Laghi. And here in this area, it's a little bit warmer than the north, a little less slope in theory. And the soil is also this calcareous marl soil. That kind of white, generally speaking, white, calcareous soil. And I found this a couple weeks ago, I guess, at a local store here where I live, and in the mid-low 20s. And so this is really an interesting wine in the sense of not particularly very expensive. Definitely has some age on it. As a 2011, essentially 12 years age. I believe they aged this. It's hard to find information on this old of vintage from them, but their current vintage ages for about 18 months in barrel and then another 6 in bottle. So I assume it's got some barrel influence and a really fun, ooh, there's the color. A really fun little kind of experience to buy something that I'm taking some risk with at the store. Not a whole lot of risk in that price point for me, but this wine could certainly be past its prime, but could also be displaying some beautiful characteristics if it's been stored properly and the quality of the wine is good. So I can't say that I've ever had this grape before, Rebo. But I've had Teroldego. I'm a huge fan. I really love Merlot as well. And so I'm really excited to try this. The color, you can definitely see. It looks like it's been aging well. There's not a whole lot of, I don't know if I can zoom in and catch that color just right, but the rim doesn't have too much of a discoloration or a gradient towards orange and yellow. So the older a wine will get, that gradient from the inside of the glass to the outside, the edge will become more orange and more yellow as a red wine ages. And so you can kind of tell to an extent the age of a wine and how it's holding up to an extent. You can definitely sense that there is some age on the wine, but by no means does it seem on first sniff that it's dead. So just to talk a little bit more about this grape variety. So a cross between Merlot and Teroldego. The Merlot, when this guy crossed and created this variety a century ago, wanted to take this kind of roundness and the fruitiness and the suppleness, the texture of that Merlot, with the kind of the aromatics and the dark color, and a little bit more structure and tannin and acidity from that Teroldego. And so that's what, in theory, that this viticulturist was shooting for. And it's just wonderful to see, there's so many different grapes out there, and Italy is certainly one of those places that has just oodles of indigenous varieties, to try new things, have new experiences. And there's these places like this that grow, really, a very small amount in the scheme of world viticulture. And so we get to taste this just really unique variety from a wonderful growing region that has a lot of history and at the same time has kind of new modern techniques. Pravis is a second generation winery, so for Italy it's quite young. Says on their website they've been growing grapes for about 40 years. And I have had from them before, actually a while ago, I believe they're Nosiola, Nosiola, which is a white variety, also an indigenous variety, and is a really lovely, characterful wine as well. So definitely recommend that grape, and I'm looking forward to tasting this wine from Pravis. So getting some of the dried fruit notes, that little bit of like a potpourri of kind of dried cranberry, dried cherry. There's a touch of leather. You can see that it's gone into some oak. There's still a freshness of this kind of purpley, I hesitate to say plum fruit, but I would say a kind of a dark cherry profile as well. The nose definitely reminds me of Italy so much. It's kind of earthy forest floor, kind of wet leaves, forest floor type of aromatics. A pretty nose. Seems like it's changing a lot, so it'll be really interesting to follow this wine throughout the day. I wouldn't expect it to last very well, to be honest, till tomorrow, just because of its age. Get a little bit of that fennel seed that I feel like I get from the oak. That's kind of fun, that licorice fennel seed profile. Kind of a dried and candied cherry cranberry note amongst that earthy forest floor tobacco leather. So fun wine. It's not disappointing on the nose, and it seems to be kind of evolving a lot right now. Let's give it a little whirl. Definitely round and has good weight to it. Almost weight like a Pinot Noir. Still bright acidity to it as well. So I think that's really helped to keep this wine intact. Tannins are, there's some hanging on, but not a whole lot of tannin. at this point in time for the wine. I feel like most of the flavor focus is up front, kind of on the periphery of my palate, my mouth. My first thought, and that's the first sip of wine for me for the day, so I don't want to particularly take a whole lot of judgment and critique off the wine in that first sip. My first thought is like, this is a food wine for sure, to go with some richer meat styles that have a little bit of fat to it, some lamb, beef, possibly pork as well. There's a lovely sweetness to this wine, almost like a vanilla extract, or maybe even vanilla bean. But there's a nice sweetness coming off the nose. That's pretty. It's a kind of vanilla. You know, I've never smelled an actual vanilla orchid, but it's kind of like vanilla meets the plant itself, as far as how I'm at least picturing it in my head. Pretty rich, powerful, intense approach on this wine. It really concentrates its flavor on the kind of front and middle of your palate, with kind of orange cranberry mixed with that kind of leather and tobacco, or kind of the predominant flavor profiles for me. The acid is still is pretty high in this wine, and for me that starts to for my body starts to yearn for food at that point in time. Certainly cheeses as well. I would say some soft creamy cheeses, Teroldego. What's that one I like so much with the little orange rind? Starts with the C, but it's kind of like a Moonster, if you will. But I feel like this wine is craving some fat to complement it. But I think that Teroldego floral aspect that is a part of this Rebo variety is kind of coming through in the aromatics of this wine. And the nose is kind of settling in at the moment into that kind of pretty floral aspect, excuse me. Oh, now there's a little bit of pepper, black pepper, peppercorn, white peppercorn coming out on the back end of the finish, which is really nice to kind of balance out that fruit, that potpourri of dried fruit and orange cranberry, a little bit of leather. That black pepper is really lovely, and so that's, I would assume, coming from that Teroldego as well. That you see in Syrah. Teroldego is half of this variety, essentially Rebo, and Teroldego being a parent of Syrah. Syrah is so well known for its peppery nature, and so it's kind of fun to kind of draw those conclusions if you know a little bit of more information about where these grapes come from. I think I'd like to talk and just kind of wrap up a little bit, and I'll give this one a taste in a second, but with hybrid varieties and these, the last two wines, not necessarily this wine and the last one, I didn't plan it this way, but are both hybrid grape varieties that are crosses, meaning two grape plants, flowers have been put together and created a new variety, a new cluster, and then a new wine at some point in time. And it's really amazing the Vitis vinifera and other grapes, but Vitis vinifera grapes, how just apt and they're ripe for crossing and blending in their their DNA mutation, and they are just really primed to be creative as a plant species, to survive, to create new varieties, and there is just such an array and breadth of grape varieties in the world, and we're creating new ones all the time with physical, manual, cross-pollination through DNA, genome, manipulation. And it's really interesting to see as the world and the climate shifts and changes and warms and cools, and at least the very least seems like there's some extremes out there, if not getting warmer as well, that there's gonna be a need for new varieties and more resilient, hardy varieties. And so it's really neat to see that this plant that we've adored as a species for so long and been blessed with, that this plant can take on so many different faces, to grow in so many different climates. And on the east coast of America, North America, and the United States, it requires, it's hot and humid in the summer, and it requires special grape variety characteristics to thrive and survive, and to hopefully at some point make good wine. But it's really neat to see all the different varieties out there, and I think it just adds to the mystique and the allure and of wine itself and grapes and the plant, and how much it has to offer, and how much we can learn about culture and geography and soil and farming and winemaking and chemistry and all these things to this really unique product. So it's always just a treat to try these new wines, and I encourage you to get out there and try wines from the Alto Adige. This one actually is, it's outside of Trento, which is the main town in the south. And at the time in 2011, this was just what they call an IGT wine, so an Indicazione Geografica Tipica, an IGT. And that IGT is called the Vigneti delle Dolomiti, the Dolomite vineyards, essentially, the vineyards of the Dolomites. And I believe now they may have a DOC, so a somewhat more regulated at the very least, and kind of recognized grape growing area. But this whole valley, shooting north essentially from Verona in Italy, this valley starts from north of Verona, lakes and mountains along the way, and it gets more narrow and narrow as you get closer towards Austria and the mountains there. And it is just a stunning area with phenomenal agriculture, grapes being one of those, and from what I've experienced, beautiful people and culture, and so much to learn and experience. And it's just such a treat to be able to taste something like this wine, this grape variety. And so I would highly recommend to try wines from Pravis, to go out and find a Teroldego if the descriptor today sounds good to you. If you like Syrah, it might be something to venture into, is Teroldego. There is a lot more Teroldego than there is Rebo, R-E-B-O. So you can find that in many places. Of course, there's Merlot galore, and it's one of the world's best grape varieties that there is. So definitely highly recommend that too. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, please post them down below. Like the video if you've liked it. Love to hear from you, your thoughts and questions. And I'm gonna give this wine one more sip, nose and sip. Oh, this nose is getting softer, sweeter, and that's part of the oxidation process. So these wines, wine itself, as it ages, it's slowly dying. But during that process, that kind of dying process, every wine is unique, and how long it can age, and what it looks like during that aging process. But that oxidation, so that interaction with air, is necessary. You don't want too much. That's why this cork right here, regulates how much air goes in and out. But you have to have some air going in, And so right now, as this wine has been unearthed, if you will, we've pulled the cork, we've sent oxygen in at a very high dose. It's going to rapidly kind of become sweeter and more expressive until, whenever that is, tonight, an hour from now, until it kind of gives itself up and it kind of goes bad, if you will. So, but at the moment, it actually kind of reminds me, this is oddly enough, I've worked in Barolo. This reminds me of Barolo, this beautiful rose petal, violet sweetness to the wine on the nose. It's really pretty, really pretty. I think you're getting the oak that it's sat in. It's given it some structure and some flavor to keep it in that sweet range. The acid is still lively and high, which for me, this wine, I wouldn't really want to have a whole lot more on its own. I'm gonna put the cork in it, enjoy it with some food tonight. But yeah, I think for $22, $3, $4, whatever I paid, a really fun little side street spur trail to go down on a wine that yeah, just brings something new to my palate, my mind to think about. And I like drinking older wine, but often most of the older wine that comes across my way, wherever that is usually just old and not tasting very good. So I generally tend to drink younger wines in that 3 to 7 year range of reds, just because there's less of a chance of that wine being past its prime. I have had some older wines, and there are so many that age beautifully and become phenomenal. So I don't want to discourage you there, but often it comes with a price point. And so this was a fun pull, fun buy that didn't break the bank and delivered some age. And I would encourage you to kind of scope out at your local store where you can find these fun, interesting steals, and give them a chance if things look good. And if you know a little bit maybe about the wine growing region or what have you, ask the salesperson at your store what their thoughts are. This was the last bottle on the shelf of this wine, so they didn't know much about it. But yeah, I knew a little bit about the producer, so I had some insight, and I knew it's a kind of cool growing region. So I had a thought that it might still be alive and kicking, which it is. So hope you've enjoyed this video. Check back in. And until next time, buona giornata. Ciao.